No intro since I don't want to waste your time, onto the video. So I already made this video for Overwatch 1 roughly 2 months ago, and it's safe to say circumstances have changed. Genji is pretty far from being the worst hero in Overwatch 2, now with his contemporaries such as Echo and Tracer receiving nerfs, alongside the significantly reduced amount of CC in the game, helping Genji actually not feed with his Dragon Blade. Just like the Genji video, let's start off with the most important thing. What does worst actually mean? Well, in my definition, it's whoever is closest to having the highest cost for the lowest rewards. As usual, I'll use my legendary Elon Musk Dogecoin analogy in my prior videos for those who need clarification. Think of it as an investment where, say I buy $10,000 worth of Dogecoin and I only get $100 back. Say I made another investment where I buy $20,000 worth of Dogecoin and got $150 back. Even though I have a larger reward in the second investment by $50, it's still technically a worse investment proportional to the larger cost. Now, I know there's going to be some people in my comment section stating how Symmetra is actually the worst hero in the game at the moment, and not Roadhog, evident in a recent poll I ran, where over 60% of you guys ranked Symmetra as being worse than Roadhog. But here's a cost versus reward graph to help explain my thought process. Essentially, the closer in the bottom right you are, the worse, and as you can see, I believe that Roadhog has a marginally higher cost than Symmetra with roughly the same rewards. Doomfist is also on here because he does have a very high cost, arguably higher than Roadhog, but I believe that when played properly, his reward is much higher. If you hate the new Doomfist, just like Get Quick Done says, it's probably because you're bad, and why would I ever judge how good a hero is based on how you don't properly play them? Before I move on to defining cost, I'll quickly go over some honourable mentions. Torbjorn. Torb isn't a great hero due to his inconsistent damage and the slight nerf to his overload, but he's still a strong option against flankers like Tracer who've already been nerfed. Torb still has a niche space in the game. Moira. Alright, so quick edit coming in from Future Cager here. There is a new beta patch that just released as of me editing this video that gives Moira this necrotic orb which drastically reduces the damage her enemies do. And it's kind of made her broken.
Holy fuck!
So I don't expect this to go through, but do take what I say next with a pinch of salt. Moira also has her niche place in the game. She works well with Brawl Dive hybrids, namely Talon Dive, which the Dallas Fuel have been playing a decent bit. Reaper. His damage was reduced, but his flanking playstyle is still great, especially coupled with a Zarya bubble and Lucio speed. Sombra. Sombra at pro play isn't great, but in any form of uncoordination, she dominates. She still functions as a decent counter against Ball or Doomfist despite the change to her hack. Orisa. Orisa's lacking shield and basically non-existent win rate in the pro scene arguably render her worse than Roadhog in terms of rewards. However, the stupid amount of sustain Orisa has with her Fortify and Spear Spin and armor give her more staying power than a hero like Roadhog. Pharah. With one less hero in the game, it's rather costly to run a pharmacy duo. Hit scan counterparts like Soldier, Ashe, and Sojourn's Railgun, alongside projectile counters like Echo, are solid to great responses against the Pharah. However, her playstyle still hasn't fundamentally changed. She's still a lethal, explosive duelist, and I recommend checking out my Pharah guide if you don't yet know how to play her. Cost is defined into 4 categories, with an extra subcategory. The first category is mechanical cost. Does the hero take a lot of mechanics to use? The second category is risk against rewards. How much risk am I taking by playing the hero? Am I constantly putting my life at risk? The subcategory here is for the rewards, being subdivided into coordination. Essentially, does the hero get a higher or lower reward in a ranked environment or in a team environment where you do have some coordination? The third category is cooldowns or time investments. Time investment basically means how long do you have to wait until you get the rewards. For example, a hero which requires you to hard flank would have a high time investment. The fourth category is resource creation or denial. Can the hero create resources for your team, such as space, or can the hero deny resources from the enemy team? Resources is basically any advantage you can create or deny, such as damage, healing, utility, space, time, or attention. Let's start off with the first and arguably easiest category. Hog doesn't really require that much mechanics to use. Sure, there's a tough, clutch hook you may need to land every now and then, like against a Nanoblade or a Sigma's Flux, but for the most part, this isn't necessary for the hero to function. Most Hogs at the highest level, like 6, can, with ease, land well over 50% of their hooks, and they damn well need to in order to get any value. When comparing with other heroes like Symmetra, they also haven't got that great of a mechanical cost, especially when Symmetra is being played how she's supposed to be played, i.e. in run comps, you'll predominantly be beaming down enemies. Landing reliable TP bombs may be a bit more difficult now, with players not adjusting to the faster and smaller right clicks, but up close, they're really no more difficult than landing a Roadhog hook. Not to mention, Sim's turrets are basically auto-aim, so there's that. Next up is Doomfist, who does indeed have a decently higher mechanical cost. Players are certainly going to take some time to adjust to him because his mechanics aren't always intuitive, and Get Quick Dawn certainly has his complex rollouts to say the least.
What?
But with Doom only having a slam and a punch in his kit, most would agree that the mechanical skill ceiling has been reduced. Next up, moving on to risk versus reward, arguably the most important section here. Here, Roadhog greatly suffers. To explain why Roadhog is such a terrible pick, I have to explain how he first functioned in Overwatch 1. Essentially, because Roadhog would be played alongside another tank, and it doesn't really matter who, the other tank would draw enough attention on the frontline to allow Roadhog to flank and get a cheeky hook. This is probably why you find Hog so frustrating in your games, because he seemingly just pops out of nowhere, and it's probably because he knows how to time his flanks just right. However, with Hog being the only tank in Overwatch 2, there's nobody else to draw your attention away, hence it's easier to keep mental tabs on the Hog. This makes it significantly more risky for Hog to flank, and that's partially why in the Overwatch League, when you do see Hog being used in Overwatch 2, such as the Shock recently, it's normally done to force point pressure using cover and hook threats. Temporal did make a video way back in the first beta in April, covering how Hog might function in Overwatch 2 as a poke alternative to Sigma, but the lack of a shield, alongside the constant threat of Arnold's anti-nades, makes Hog a feed pick against competent players and teams. Comparatively, a hero like Symmetra does still carry risk, but when played right, that risk can be minimised. Her TP bombs are lethal, and with a competent frontline, she can be played effectively even with the changes in the most recent beta. A hero like Doomfist also carries great risk because of how squishy he is. The power block nerf increases the risk, and the seismic slam nerf decreases the rewards. However, with a coordinated dive, you can see Doomfist working. His incredible mobility allows him to just get in and out of sticky situations with clever movement, drawing away enough attention to allow his Sojourn and Tracer to pop off. Too many people are playing tank Doomfist too much like a DPS, which is why people call him bad, because Punch no longer one-shots anymore, and you actually have to aim with your shotgun to do any meaningful damage. If top 500 Doomfist players like Get Quick Dawn and Chipsa can state or imply that Doomfist is still a hero with a high reward, it's probably an issue on your end. Before I move on, with the subcategory in rewards, heroes like Symmetra obviously get more value in a team environment compared to Hog, who thrives in a more uncoordinated environment. But I'd probably say Sim, even with these changes, is slightly better in an uncoordinated environment than Hog playing in a coordinated environment. I've already explained why his flanking playstyle doesn't work so well in Overwatch 2, and at least Symmetra can still do TP bombs and fire off right clicks that have a higher chance of landing than before. Now onto the third section, cooldowns and time investment. Thankfully, cooldowns is a relatively straightforward section. Hog's cooldown cost is not the worst in the world, but certainly not the best. However, his time investment can be an issue. If you are going to spend the entire game hard flanking as Hog, you better land that hook, otherwise it's not only time that's going to be wasted. With Symmetra, I'm not gonna lie, her cooldowns look chunky. Her TP being on a 16-second cooldown is horrible to say the least, and whilst you could argue that the time investment is lower because TP bombs take one less second to activate, you better get that TP placement on point, otherwise you'll have to wait over a quarter of a minute to get your TP back. Doom's cooldowns are actually decently short. As Spilo explains here, Doomfist has got one of the shortest cooldown cycles as a tank.
So his cooldown cycle happens rapidly because slam and punch are all he's waiting for. He's not waiting for a bubble, he's just waiting for slam and punch is basically no cooldown at all, and slam is not near as long as something like a bubble. In addition, his health pool is smaller and his hitbox is smaller, and he often, with his abilities, has ways of regenerating health, which means that his cycles can be a lot faster than, say, Winston. He can go in and out over and over and over again.
Lastly, onto the fourth cost of resource creation and or denial. This is pretty vague, but it's safe to say that heroes like Doom, Sim or Hog don't directly deny any resources, and it's arguably not a fair comparison because a hero like Hog or Doomfist, who are tanks, are supposed to draw more attention and resources away from the frontline than a DPS hero, though I will keep this in mind. For now, let's just see the resources Hog can create. The most obvious one is space and attention, utilising the threat of his hook to zone an area of the map. I mentioned this earlier, but the Shock did this pretty effectively, with Kaluge utilising the cover in the middle of Oasis as to not take too much damage, but also gives Kaluge some nice sidelines to work with and to land some hooks on the opposing Wrecking Ball. However, that's about it, to be honest. The only reason this really works is because of Muse's incapability of playing a hit and run playstyle on ball alongside bad timing from his DPS. Why the Defiant don't surround and encompass the Shock with their greater map control is beyond me, and this is really why Hog just doesn't get played. If Hog goes on a hard flank to divert attention onto him, there's about a billion things that can stop a Hog. Some smart dueling by 1v2ing on heroes like Sombra, Tracer, Sojourn or Wrecking Ball, alongside the utility of Discord, Nade, Whipshot, Brig third person shielding, or Lucio booping, makes Hog flanking significantly less effective. With Symmetra, even with these changes, I still think that she can create just as many resources, if not more than Hog, whilst being safer. We haven't even touched on ultimates yet, and Symmetra's ultimate is incredibly strong in the majority of cases. Here's Spylo and myself explaining how an aggressive Symmetra wall can help take space, and how a defensive Symmetra wall can help hold space.
If the fight is happening here, the best way to use your wall is split right down the middle. Because that way that wall is accessible here, or here, or here, or here. It's like constantly, like all the way down between you and the enemy team. You can jiggle back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. It's so disruptive.
You can also use Symmetra Wall to take space against the enemy zoning ults, acting like a wider Reinhardt barrier. For example, on Havana first point defense, when trying to touch cart, if the enemy McCree high noons, you can simply block it with your shield to allow your team to safely rotate and contest cart. Now in comparison to Roadhog, yes, his ultimate did receive a nice buff to manually control when you fire, but that doesn't really increase the reward of his ultimate, but rather slightly decreases the risk of him using it. So that's the video. If you enjoyed, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and if this video helped to raise your IQ, be sure to share it with your friends to also raise theirs. Until next time.